Imagine waking up tomorrow with unshakable calm to face any challenge, no matter how overwhelming your anxiety feels. Anxiety can make every decision feel impossible. What if you could apply 7 ancient Stoic strategies taught by emperors and philosophers to overcome that anxiety and reclaim your peace? Today you will learn the first 2 strategies that will immediately shift your mindset and begin reducing your anxiety. And by the end of this part, you will know exactly what to focus on to take back control and prepare for the deeper techniques ahead. Strategy 1. Focus only on what you can control. It starts with a deceptively simple idea from Epictetus. Some things are up to us, and some things are not. This may sound obvious, but once you really understand it, it changes everything. Most of our anxiety comes from trying to control what's not in our hands. We try to predict what others will think, how a situation will turn out, or whether everything will go perfectly according to plan. The problem is, all of those things are outside of us. You can't control someone else's opinion. You can't force the future to obey your expectations. But what you can control: your thoughts, your choices, your effort. Those are where your true power lies. When you remind yourself of this, especially in anxious moments, it feels like unclenching a tight fist. You begin to breathe again. You realize that while the storm may rage around you, your inner response is still yours to shape. Let's say you're facing something stressful, maybe a big meeting or an uncertain situation with your health. You can obsess over every possible outcome, spiral into what-ifs, and let your nerves take over. Or you can stop and ask yourself, what is within my control right now? Maybe it's preparing well. Maybe it's getting enough sleep, speaking with clarity, asking the right questions. That's where your focus should go, not on controlling the storm, but on adjusting your sails. The more you practice this distinction, the easier it becomes. Over time, you start noticing how often your mind tries to drift into things that aren't your business to control. You catch yourself earlier. You redirect your energy. You build the muscle of mental discipline. And slowly, anxiety has fewer places to hide. Strategy 2. Premeditatio malorum. Rehearse the storm before it arrives. Now, the second strategy might seem a little strange at first. The Stoics called it premeditatio malorum, which literally means the premeditation of evils. In simpler words, it means imagining what could go wrong on purpose. At first glance, this might sound like the exact opposite of what you should do if you're anxious. Why would you focus on worst-case scenarios? Isn't that just feeding the fear? But that's not what the Stoics were doing. They weren't indulging in panic. They were training their minds. When you take time each day to briefly imagine small setbacks, a delayed flight, a tough conversation, an unexpected bill, you give your brain a controlled rehearsal. You're not panicking, you're preparing. And preparation is the antidote to helplessness. Think of it like this. A firefighter doesn't wait for a building to be in flames before thinking about how to act. They run drills. They imagine the pressure. They get familiar with the chaos before it arrives. In the same way, when you mentally rehearse small moments of adversity, you reduce their power over you. You're no longer shocked when things go wrong. You've already met that moment in your mind, and you survived it. This kind of practice actually builds emotional resilience. It teaches your nervous system that discomfort isn't the end of the world. You stop reacting out of fear, and you start responding with clarity. Let's go deeper. Imagine you fear losing your job. Most people avoid thinking about that. It's too scary, too overwhelming, but avoidance feeds anxiety. So instead, sit with that thought. What would you do if it happened? You might be shocked. You might cry, you might feel lost, and then what? You'd call someone, you'd look for something new. You'd find a way because you're capable. By walking through the fear in your mind, you don't make it more likely, you make it less terrifying. You go from being held hostage by your imagination to becoming its master. This is what the Stoics meant by strengthening your inner citadel. You're building mental fortitude brick by brick, not by denying fear exists, but by meeting it with open eyes. You're not passively waiting for peace to arrive. You're actively training for it. Over time, you stop dreading the uncertain. You stop obsessing over perfection. You start trusting yourself. And that quiet trust, that quiet strength, becomes the foundation for real calm.
Patty.
Anxiety often feels like a silent weight we carry, not always loud but always there. You wake up with it, go through your day with it, and sometimes it even visits you in the middle of the night. In part 1, we saw how the Stoics focused on what they could control and rehearsed setbacks before they happened. But that's just the beginning. There's a deeper level to Stoic calmer mindset that not only neutralizes fear, but rewires the way you perceive life itself. Because to truly master anxiety, you don't just need to survive the moment. You need to change your relationship with time, identity, and even pain itself. And the Stoics understood this better than anyone. Strategy 3. Amor Fati. Love your fate. Don't just accept it. There's a concept in Stoicism called Amor Fati, Latin for love of fate. It's not just about putting up with the bad stuff or tolerating discomfort. Amor Fati is about leaning into every moment as if it were chosen for you, not against you. That means even the setbacks, the rejections, the broken plans, especially those. Because if everything that happens is part of your story, then there's no wasted pain, only growth, only depth. This isn't just philosophical fluff, it's mental alchemy. It transforms what would normally trigger anxiety into an invitation. To rise, imagine your train is delayed. Instead of cursing the universe, Amor Fati invites you to ask, how can I use this? Maybe it gives you 20 quiet minutes you wouldn't have had. Maybe it teaches you patience. Or maybe, just maybe, it saved you from being in the wrong place at the wrong time. You don't need to know why things happen. You only need to decide they will serve you. That decision is everything. Because anxiety feeds on resistance. It grows in the gap between what is and what we wish would be. Amor Fati collapses that gap. It says, what is enough. Let it shape you. Let it sculpt you. Let it teach you how to be unbreakable. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, a blazing fire makes flame and brightness out of everything that is thrown into it. That's the heart of Amor Fati. You're the fire. And everything that happens, good, bad, chaotic, is just more fuel. The moment you stop wishing for a perfect life and start using this life, anxiety begins to lose its grip. Because you're not hoping for a path with no obstacles. You're becoming the kind of person who walks any path with strength. Strategy 4. View from above. Gain distance from the chaos. Now here's a mental shift that the Stoics used constantly, especially when emotions ran high. They called it the view from above. It's simple in concept but profound in impact. Imagine rising up above your life like a bird, seeing yourself from a great height. Now zoom out even more, your neighborhood, your city, your country. Eventually, your problems look like a pinprick in the vastness of space and time. This isn't to minimize what you're going through, it's to put it in context, because anxiety often traps us in a tiny, dark tunnel where all we can see is fear. The view from above cracks that tunnel open and lets light in. Marcus Aurelius practiced this constantly. In the middle of wars, political betrayals, and plague, he reminded himself, soon you will have forgotten all things, and all things will have forgotten you. That sounds bleak, but it's actually freeing. You don't have to carry the whole world on your shoulders. Your life matters deeply, but your worries, they are temporary. They are dust in the wind. When you rise mentally, above your situation, your breath slows, your shoulders drop. You remember that this moment is one scene in a much bigger story. Try this the next time you feel overwhelmed. Close your eyes and imagine yourself floating above the room, then the building, then the whole city. Watch the traffic, the people, moving, the lights turning on and off. You're just one heartbeat in a sea of millions. And in that vastness you are safe. You are held. You are small, yes, but not insignificant. You're a part of something greater. And in that perspective, the urgent fades. The eternal remains. So many of our fears come from zooming in too close. We obsess over details, over what people said, over what might go wrong next week. But if you can zoom out even for a few moments, you regain the power to breathe, to observe, to choose. The view from above reminds you that you are not your panic. You are the awareness behind it. And from that height, peace is always available. Anxiety thrives in the dark corners of our mind, the what-ifs, the imagined failures, the conversations replayed too many times. It spins stories we start to believe, even if they aren't real. But the Stoics were masters at bringing light to those corners. In the last two parts, we explored the power of accepting fate and gaining perspective from above. Now we go deeper into the mind itself. Because if your thoughts create your reality, then the way you think is everything. And to the Stoics, that wasn't just a theory, it was a discipline. Strategy 5. Master your inner dialogue. What you tell yourself, you become. Every day, thousands of thoughts run through your mind, and most of them repeat. They're habits, scripts, and if you're not aware of them, they start to shape your identity. The Stoics understood this long before modern psychology caught up. They knew that what you say to yourself in silence becomes your truth. That's why Epictetus said, "It's not things that upset us, but our judgment about things. It's not the meeting or the breakup or the unknown future. It's the story you tell yourself about those things." So what are you telling yourself when things go wrong? I'm not good enough. This always happens to me. I can't handle this. The Stoics would stop you right there, not with pity, but with clarity. Because those words aren't harmless, they're bricks. Each one builds the prison you walk around in. But here's the power. You can tear it down. Not by pretending everything's fine, but by replacing falsehoods with truth. When something hard happens, the Stoic response isn't to sugarcoat it. It's to meet it with reason. This is painful, but it's not permanent. I didn't choose this, but I can choose my response. I've been through worse and I survived. These thoughts don't erase the challenge. They sharpen you, inside it. And that's the Stoic edge. It's not about being fearless, it's about choosing thoughts that make you stronger than the fear. Even Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, had to remind himself daily. His meditations weren't written for others, they were written for him. They were notes to self, mental armor, truths repeated until they became reflex. That's how you master your inner dialogue, not with wishful thinking, but with repetition, discipline, honesty. You talk to yourself like someone you respect. You stop lying to your own heart, and over time that voice becomes your anchor. Strategy 6. Live according to nature. Accept, adapt, and align. Now here's a strategy that's been misunderstood for centuries, but when applied correctly, it's life-changing. The Stoics often said, live according to nature, but they didn't mean go live in the woods. They meant live in harmony with reality. Understand your role in the larger system. Accept the seasons of life. Adapt to what you can't control. Align your actions with who you truly are, not who the world pressures you to be. To live according to nature is to realize that change is not the enemy, it's the essence of everything. Trees shed their leaves, rivers shift course, animals adapt to survive. So why do we resist when life asks us to change? Why do we panic when plans fall apart? Or when people leave? Or when things don't go as expected? The Stoics would say, because we forget that this is nature. Impermanence isn't a glitch, it's the code. And anxiety fades the moment you stop fighting that truth. This is where so many modern problems begin. We expect life to hold still. We want certainty, guarantees. But that's not how nature works. The Stoics trained themselves to flow with reality, not against it. And you can do the same. When things shift, you don't collapse, you adapt. When something breaks, you rebuild. When you feel overwhelmed, you return to simplicity, breath, action, presence. You remember that you are a part of nature too, and nature doesn't panic. It adjusts. Seneca wrote, "Fate leads the willing and drags the unwilling." That's the core of this strategy. Will you resist life and suffer, or will you align with it and grow? When you live in tune with how life actually works, anxiety starts to seem unnecessary. You no longer demand things to be different, you move with what is. You become like water, soft but unstoppable. So much of our fear comes from the illusion of permanence. We think things will always stay the same or that they should, but nothing in nature stays still. When you embrace that, When you live not by fantasy, but by reality, you stop gripping so tightly. You open your hands, and in that moment anxiety loses its power. You're not falling behind, you're flowing forward, with purpose, with grace. Anxiety doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it hides behind restlessness, short tempers, or a constant urge to distract yourself. But to the Stoics, there's always a reason beneath the surface. And more importantly, there's always a way through. They knew the storm is never really outside, it's inside. That's why their wisdom cuts deeper the more we struggle. And in this part, we explore 2 more strategies that help the modern mind slow down, find peace, and reconnect with what actually matters. Strategy 7. Focus on your role, not the outcome. You can't control the result. The Stoics accepted that early on. What you can control is how well you play your part. Epictetus explained it like this: life is like a play. You don't get to choose your role, but you do get to choose how you act. That mindset changes everything, because anxiety is often rooted in results, whether things will work out, what people will think, whether you'll succeed or fail. But the Stoics would ask, is that even your job? Your job is the effort, the discipline, the preparation. You train your mind, sharpen your character, take the step, and let go of the rest. That's what separates the Stoic from the frantic. The Stoic still cares, but they don't panic. They don't obsess. They pour their energy into what they control and make peace with what they don't. And ironically, that mindset often leads to better outcomes. Why? Because they're not paralyzed by fear. They're too busy acting with excellence. Imagine if you stopped measuring your worth by results. Imagine if you judged yourself only by the integrity of your actions. That's how you remove anxiety from your goals. Whether it's a job interview, a business pitch, or a conversation you've been dreading, your only task is to show up with clarity and courage. Not perfection, not performance, just presence and principle. The outcome? That belongs to fate. But how you show up, that's yours. Own it. Strategy 8. Train through voluntary discomfort. Get stronger than the fear. There's a reason the Stoics practiced discomfort on purpose. Seneca would sleep on the floor. Marcus Aurelius would walk through Rome at night without guards. Epictetus, born a slave, would go days with little food, but none of it was to suffer for the sake of suffering. It was training, because anxiety feeds on comfort. It grows when we're afraid to lose what we have. But if you learn to endure small difficulties voluntarily, you become harder to shake when real ones arrive. Think about it. When was the last time you stepped into discomfort by choice, not because life forced it, but because you chose it? Cold showers, fasting, public speaking, waking up early. These aren't just habits, they're acts of rebellion against fear. They remind your brain, I can do hard things. The more often you prove that, the less anxious you feel about the unknown. Because the unknown stops being something to avoid and becomes something you're already built to face. The Stoics didn't become calm by chance. They forged it. One choice at a time, one trial at a time. They weren't superhuman, they were just practiced, rehearsed, conditioned. So when anxiety came, it found no weakness to cling to, no fear that hadn't already been walked through in advance. That's the power of voluntary discomfort. It makes you stronger before life tests you. So when you feel anxiety creeping in, remember, it's not always a signal to retreat. Sometimes, it's an invitation to train, to lean in. Anxiety is clever. It doesn't always roar sometimes, it whispers. It suggests that you're behind, that everyone else has it figured out, that you're not ready. It pulls your attention to things that haven't even happened yet and makes you live there. But the Stoics knew a way out, not by denying the fear, but by facing it with wisdom sharper than emotion. And in this chapter, we uncover 2 more ancient strategies, timeless tools for calming the storm within. Strategy 9. Stop chasing control. Start embracing flow. The modern mind wants certainty. We want to know what's next, how it ends, and what people think about us along the way. But this craving, this need to control every outcome is a trap. The Stoics knew that life isn't a chessboard where you move the pieces and everything behaves. It's more like a river. You can paddle, you can steer, but the current, that's never yours to own. So Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Accept whatever comes woven in the pattern of your destiny." Not because he didn't care, but because he understood resistance to fate is resistance to peace. The Stoic doesn't let go of effort, they let go of illusion. And there's no illusion greater than the belief that we can predict or command the flow of life. You prepare, you respond, you adapt, but you don't cling. When you stop trying to force life to obey you, when you finally surrender the script you wrote in your head, the anxiety starts to fade. Because the tension comes not from what's happening, but from your grip on what should be happening. Loosen the grip. Trust the process. Let go of the fake control. That's not weakness, that's the strength of the Stoic. The courage to act fully and the wisdom to release fully. Strategy 10. Journal with brutal honesty. Face what's actually there. Most people don't journal. They vent, they avoid, or worse, they distract. But the Stoics, they journaled like warriors, not to soothe, but to sharpen. Marcus Aurelius's meditations weren't for show. They were private, raw, real. He'd call himself out, remind himself of death, question his motives. It wasn't pretty, but it was powerful. That's what Stoic journaling is, a mirror with no filters. Because anxiety often survives in silence. It feeds on the things you won't face. But when you write them down, the fears, the doubts, the regrets, you turn fog into form. You get to ask, is this even true? What am I afraid of, really? What's the worst that happens? What would a wise person do? And here's the magic: the moment you name the fear, it loses some of its weight. The moment you see it on paper, it becomes smaller than the giant it felt like in your mind. Stoic journaling isn't about beautiful language, it's about clarity. It's about facing the internal chaos and bringing order to it with ink and courage. So tonight, write without filter. Ask the hard questions. Be honest about where you're slipping, what you're clinging to, and what you're pretending not to know. Because when you do, when you write like a philosopher, not a victim, you take one step closer to freedom. And freedom for the Stoics was always the goal. There's a war most people never see. Not on a battlefield, but inside the mind. It's the subtle battle between reaction and reason, panic and poise. We feel it when the pressure builds, when the unknown tightens around us, when our thoughts start racing faster than the moment. And in that chaos, the Stoics offer ancient tools, quiet weapons of clarity, forged in fire and sharpened by practice. Strategy 11. Turn the obstacle into the path. Most people flinch at adversity. They see problems as signs they're on the wrong road, as if difficulty is proof that something's broken. But the Stoics believed the opposite. To them, resistance was a sign that you were finally facing something real. Marcus Aurelius wrote it best: "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." This wasn't philosophy. This was survival. When life blocks your path, the average person complains or waits for rescue. But the Stoic, they pause and ask, how do I use this? That delay, that heartbreak, that failure, can it make you wiser? Can it make you tougher, more disciplined, more detached from ego? Because here's the truth. Your anxiety about the obstacle isn't from the thing itself, it's from your belief that it shouldn't be there. But what if it's not a mistake? What if it's a lesson in disguise, a pressure that forges the steel of your soul? When you start seeing obstacles not as interruptions, but as instructions, everything changes. You stop running. You start adapting. You stop fearing. You start building. The Stoic doesn't avoid discomfort, they alchemize it. They use every hardship as a gym for the mind. And the irony, when you face adversity head-on, it often shrinks. It was your resistance that kept it big. Now it becomes fuel. Now it becomes forward. Strategy 12. Practice voluntary discomfort. Modern life is soft, comfortable, padded with conveniences designed to keep us warm, fed, and constantly entertained. But the Stoics feared this comfort not because they wanted suffering, but because they knew that too much ease makes the soul fragile. So what did they do? They practiced discomfort on purpose. Seneca would sleep on the floor. He'd wear rough clothing. He'd eat plain meals, not because he had to, but because he wanted to remind himself, is this what I feared? He wanted to face the worst before it arrived, to train for chaos while still at peace. Today we run from any sign of discomfort, and in doing so we make anxiety our master. But the Stoic flips the script. You fast and realize hunger won't kill you. You turn off your phone and realize boredom isn't death. You walk in silence, expose yourself to nature, speak in public, take cold showers, risk embarrassment. Why? Because each time you do, you become less afraid. And when the real storm hits, the one you didn't see coming, you're not caught off guard. You've already trained in the rain. You've already been uncomfortable by choice, so you don't panic when it's forced. The Stoic builds an inner fortress, not by staying safe, but by practicing pressure. So next time you feel overwhelmed, ask yourself, have I trained for this? Have I willingly stretched my limits, or have I stayed soft? Because the mind that has faced discomfort you've made it through all 7 parts. That alone says something about you. Not everyone takes the time to understand their mind, most just run from it. But you didn't. You stopped, you looked inward, and you chose to learn. These strategies aren't magic. They don't promise a life without anxiety, but they give you something better, a way to face it, a way to stop being at its mercy, a way to respond with clarity, not panic. That's what the Stoics trained for. Not to feel nothing, but to act with reason, even when everything inside them wanted to run. And now you have that same choice. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be aware of your thoughts, aware of what's in your control, aware that every moment, even this one, is a chance to come back to yourself. Don't let this be something you watched and forgot. Let it be something you practice, quietly, consistently. That's where the real change happens. You've got the tools. Use them well. So until next time, act wisely and act Stoic.